minutes remaining.
And may I ask the gentleman from Oregon the
I
time
don't
that he would
expect
like.
I'll use anywhere near half that, so why don't you just
I'd
yield
be
me such
happy to
time
yield
as I
5
may
minutes to the gentleman from
The
Oregon.
gentleman from Oregon is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman. I was listening with interest to some of the statements made earlier in the debate about the administration deliberately restraining the oil and gas industry in this country. Actually, the facts belie those statements. The federal lands oil production is growing faster than that on private lands, plus 30, plus 35. Obviously, they start with a larger base, but still, it is growing faster. So that hardly shows any deliberate attempt by the Obama administration to limit this production. And then, again, they talked about, that this president had not leased an adequate amount of land. But if you look, these little photos are the former President George Bush, and when the lines start to go up, these are the current President, Barack Obama. And onshore oil production on federal lands is up 35%. So let's deal with what the real intent here is. The Obama administration has an all-of-the-above strategy. They're trying to produce these resources responsibly. The other side of the aisle would have us believe that environmental laws and other restrictions and an intentional campaign by the Obama administration is making us vulnerable to foreign influence. Was actually our imports were at the lowest level in recent history in the last year. We're producing more and more of our own oil and headed toward self-sufficiency. But we also have to deal with climate change, and we also have to deal with prices to consumers. Now, this legislation, we're actually celebrating Thanksgiving a week early. I would call the bill a turkey, but it's not just a turkey. It's leftovers from Turkey Day because we've actually passed this legislation previously, and it went nowhere previously, as will this legislation here today. But they want to pretend that this somehow will benefit consumers and somehow that there's a campaign by the Obama administration to restrain the supply. Nothing be further from the truth. I'll have an amendment later. If we wanted to drive down, prices at the pump tomorrow by 70 cents, pretty simple. Just stop the speculation on Wall Street. But I'll talk about that more later. There are a number of provisions that are egregious. Don't have time to go into all of them. But a few things. As I mentioned earlier, basically do away with environmental protections. Muzzle the public's voice in terms of them appealing decisions by the distant federal government to develop in their backyard or next door. To elevate oil and gas drilling to the predominant use on any federal public lands. Yes, predominant use over and above hunting, fishing, recreation. Anything else, oil and gas is predominant. Now, the president also said, I think that we ought to go out and look at these parcels before we lease them. That's something they didn't do in the Bush era. We have, 25-year-old land use plans at many of these agencies. They're understaffed. They're behind. They haven't revised their land use plans in a long time. A lot of things have happened in the West in 25 years, and it might be that there is now a ski resort right next to a proposed an area that was previously available or potentially available for oil and gas leasing. Obama administration said we ought to go out and look and see how it's going to impact other activities that have come to the fore in the last 25 years. They're being criticized for that. Now that does take a little bit of time, but they're saying, hey, some states are leasing private lands, allowing them to go. They're allowing private lands to go forward in 10 days. These aren't private lands. These are the lands of the people of the United States of America. I think a little more due diligence is in order. We don't want to mimic a state that says, oh, you want to drill there? Okay, here you go. No one gets to say anything about it. It's your land. You go right ahead. Now, then there's one, it's amazing. This is kind of a fun math issue. They say that the industry can nominate land, which is the current law, but they're saying the government must lease 25% of whatever the industry chooses to nominate in a given year. So there are 130 million acres available for oil and gas leasing in the United States, predominantly in the West. So first year, the industry nominates 130 million acres. That means the Interior Department has to offer 32 million acres to lease. Now, next year, well, we've only got 100 million left, so they'd get 25% of that. That's 25 million acres. As you can figure it out, we're sort of infinitely headed towards zero here. Rush is a scientist. He can probably figure it out better. I don't know if we'd ever get to zero, but it would be an ever and ever smaller increment that we were leasing here. And yet there are 25 million acres that the industry has under lease that they haven't yet developed. But they could get this astonishing, increase. Just one additional minute.
Be gladly, I yield an additional minute to the gentleman.
Recognized for one additional minute.
Work on my math problem during the minute, see if you can get the answer. So, this, I was thinking of bringing a map of all the leasable land, but it would have been, difficult to produce. But you can get it in your imagination. So let's deal with the real problems before us. If we're going to produce energy on federal lands, make sure there's no real conflict. Let's keep the multiple use concept. I think most members of the public support that, not give oil and gas a predominant use. Let's also keep in mind that we have to look at alternative energy development on federal lands so that we can deal with climate change, which some of us believe in. But this warmed over, leftover turkey proposal will pass the House, of course. But that'll be the last that anyone hears of it. Happy Thanksgiving.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from New Jersey reserves. Gentleman from Washington is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm very pleased to yield 2 minutes to another